let's quickly go into the Q&A because of how the time sensitivity of the program. So we had three very distinct, very interesting, very encompassing presentations. So what we can do is we'll take a couple of questions. So we already have Dr. Ithika Chowdhury, queuing up. So Dr. Chowdhury, I'll give it over to you. But just a quick note, please make your questions short, succinct, and to the point because of the time challenge. Dr. Chowdhury.
Absolutely fascinating, all three. And my question, some points to Professor Jean-Marc Rickley. Sir, you're an amazing reservoir of knowledge and information. The 3 points. Now, precision. If the precision is so great, obviously, because the destruction will be limited, these would involve escalatory warfighting, unlike a nuclear war, which is absolute total destruction initially, right from the start. But here it would also involve the possibility of human intervention at some point in time to bring the destruction or destructive conflict to a close, which is probably not possible in a nuclear war. Secondly, very quickly, is swarming akin to multiple independently targeted vehicles? I mean, MIRVing and swarming, is the difference right actually in numbers? Swarming is thousands and MIRVs is probably 15, 20. And third, the last, if the surrogate weapons think faster than the human mind, then assigning responsibilities for action, is that a big problem? Because at some point in time also the weapon might think that it is smarter than the principal and therefore take action independently of the principal or disobey. So are these possibilities? Thank you, sir.
So while there's a lot to kind of ponder, we can take another question. So Professor Hilde Rapp, you can go. Yeah.
This is possibly a question that leads more into tomorrow, but I wonder to what extent there is room here for military and civil cooperation, using particularly the new technologies to help to make our world a safer place by tracking fish stocks, storms, fires, all the kinds of things that satellites are currently used for by civil authorities for disaster management. But also for securing our food chains, because we can certainly kind of track fish movements by underwater technology, and we are really in danger of expleting our food sources by not really looking after our oceans.
Okay, I think we have two substantial questions, so I think I can hand it over to Dr. Rickley, and then we'll come back to the other two presenters.
Sure.
Yeah, you're on.
Yeah, I'm on. Good. Yeah. So I didn't get your first point about precision. So I might address just swarming and MIRVing. It's very different. Swarming is really the idea that you have different units and they behave as a whole, and basically they can adapt to the environment. So if you want, the closest example we had of swarming was probably, some say, the German U-boat attack against the British-American commercial fleet during the Second World War. But here you just have the idea of the mass, Swarming is a bit more. It's really this idea of creating something from different units. Then the second point is about attribution. And obviously, this is a key issue in the cyber domain. In AI, well, in a little autonomous weapons system, it will depend, obviously, whether it's in cyber domain or not. So in the cyber domain, it might, because the a malware using a neural network will be able to adapt to its environment. That will make the issue even more complicated. The key issue, the debate in Geneva at the UN is basically, has been since the beginning, the extent of human control, meaningful human control. States could not agree on a ban, but they agree on this concept of meaningful human control. The problem with this concept is, what does that mean? You know, if all the selection of the target is predetermined by an algorithm. That was the idea of Project Maven, you know, the cooperation between Google and the US DoD, where you would have an algorithm that would do live recognition on drone streams. If the operator on its screen sees, for instance, that a house, whatever, is determined as a target, even if the operator say, yes, we strike, to what extent his decision could be considered human if the entire decision-making process has been pre-digested by an algorithm. So in that field of attribution human control, now if you add the nuclear dimension and hypersonic missiles, you end up in escalatory ladders that are extraordinary, because the time to react, what AI allows you to do is to win a lot of time, to gain a lot of time. And so basically what we will do is to shrink the time for responses, and that will obviously increase the room for mistakes. So in terms of military-civil cooperation, yeah, as I said, most of this technology, the main push factors are in the civilian industry. The problem is that this technology can be repurposed very easily. For instance, AI will have fantastic development in terms of fighting diseases. Probably will be able to fight cancer. But if you are able to engineer a mechanism that is able to detect cancerous cells and then combine it with synthetic biology and a nano boat, for instance, that will be able to kill the cancerous cells, it's very easy to actually change the destination of your payload. DARPA in the US, for instance, is working on insects to spread some genetically modified genes, you know. It's easy to combat, for instance, or to increase fertility in some soils. If you can do that for good, you can also very easily use its technology and target a specific phenotype or genotype. So this is why international governance is very important. And the problem of the UN is that the UN is a state institution, and most of these developments are in the private sector. And so people from the private sector do not feel at ease talking to the people at the UN. So we need to come up with a new institution that is able to bring together the different stakeholders in the UN. It's absolutely not easy. As a matter of fact, right now you have more than 250 initiatives worldwide on the ethics of artificial intelligence. Think about that. How do you coordinate this thing? It's a nightmare.
Thank you, but I'll also provide an opportunity for Dr. Rajagopalan to also respond to that question.
Yeah. Sure, I think among the traditional areas of secure technologies and so on and so forth, I think one of the areas that clearly saw the integration or the cooperation between military and civil aspects was outer space. Because, for instance, the remote sensing technologies, remote sensing satellites, or the Earth observation satellites, they have been primarily for a number of civil applications, large scale of survey of agricultural lands, water mapping, and so on and so forth, food production, and so on and so forth. But that also, given the kind of better resolution, you're also going to be having the same assets can be used for military applications, and so on and so forth. But a lot of the countries have preferred not to develop dedicated military satellites and are using actually dual-use satellites. So actually the cooperation between the civil and military side is greater within the outer space domain as of today, and any number of areas of cooperation, and especially countries that are developing in the Southeast Asian region, for instance, or even some of the South Asian countries are developing assets in outer space precisely for disaster management, food production, food agricultural business, and so on and so forth. So I think the possible collaboration between military and the civil side of things are so much greater within the outer space. It's such a dual-use product that you can actually use practically. You don't have to develop a dedicated military satellite at all, and countries can go down the path of having good resolution-based satellites for any number of functions, in a sense. We can have an offline chat, but I think I'm just going to stop here.
Yeah, thanks, Raji. So we have Major General Munir Usman from Bangladesh. So you can ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. My question goes to Dr. Wrigley. Fascinating presentation again, I would like to say that. What I want to ask here is, Doctor, I understand the pace of development of autonomous weapons and platforms, but is the ethics of war keeping pace with it? That is the question I have, because in many cases there are grave questions as how independent, how autonomous we can afford to have. What are the questions that are being raised between the interface that human to machine are practicing now? Because I see that the control of the drones, the killer drones that are humanly controlled, there are grave questions about the remoteness of the command structure away from the conflict zone, where you sit in a comfortable room and you push the button to kill. Is this again ethical or not? Are the laws of war being adjusted to cope with the new advances that are coming into the field? In future, in the warfare, who will be accountable, the machine or the man? Who will take responsibility for the command, for the decision? What are the questions that are being raised here? So I would like you to update on this fields, please. Thank you.
I think that's a lot of questions. So I would let Dr. Wrigley answer. So we might have a space for one question. If not, we can go for a wrap-up after the response.
Right. Thank you for this question. This is a very important question. And the GG on the lethal autonomous weapon system normally is 2 weeks per year. Normally the first 2 days are used to be devoted to the ethics of war, and this is a key question about agency. Okay, we all feel that if human kills other human being, it's bad, but that's the law of nature. If a machine autonomously kill another human being, there is something wrong. And we had the first problems of, as you mentioned, when you use drones, the drone operator, drones that were conducting counter-terrorism campaign in Yemen and Afghanistan, the operator was sitting in a bunker near Las Vegas. There were the first warning sign that there is a decoupling between the operator and the action is performing. But here we are moving towards a new level where basically you give agency to the machine. It's no longer programming a machine to kill. It's the machine being able to decide whether it will take a life or not. And so interestingly, what we've seen in the debate over the last 2 years now, especially from the Russian, and now also the Americans are coming this argument, is to say that, well, if we look at the way AI is so much more accurate than human being, if we improve and if we feed weapons with artificial intelligence system, then probably they will be more accurate to kill other human beings, and so we will eliminate friendly fire, and therefore we will actually be more in line with international humanitarian law. And so here you see a huge debate, and this debate has not been settled. The problem of accountability is a huge issue, because bear in mind that all the technology that we're witnessing now, we are just at the prehistory of this technology. But already now, when an algorithm takes a decision, we don't, in machine learning and deep learning, we don't understand how the machine took the decision. So there is almost no way to backtrack the decision-making process. So here you have a huge issue in terms of accountability, and the question is then who will be responsible? Is it the programmer? Because it's not just a programmer, because the machine by itself is able to learn. Is it the commander in the field? And so what we'll probably see emerging is that because you're in the military, what you want is predictability. If you use a weapon, you want to be sure that the effect that you search will happen. And that is good. And so there might be resistance from the military to use this weapon. But if non-state actors have access to this technology, and as I told you before, you can find swarming algorithms for free on certain database, okay? For instance, TensorFlow. So if terrorists or non-state actors start using that kind of technology, because the organizational culture is actually much more adapted to be flexible than a military organization. And then you combine that with the kind of drones I just showed you. It's just a matter of time before the two will meet. And that day, when that will happen, we'll wake up and see a very new reality. So we have to try to think ahead. That's why foresight is very important. You know, we have to think about possible future. I just finished a book chapter with a colleagues of mine from ETH in Zurich. We're working on the interface between neuroscience and artificial intelligence, and we came up in the article, the chapter with the concept of neurocrime, because we worked on brain-computer interface, so the ability to plug your brain to the machine. And this is the next step. This is what Facebook is working on, and another organization. And so what we have seen, we start to see already some results. It has been done at MIT in 2015, where an experiment was conducted where three mice, the memory of mice were erased, and a new experiment was introduced. And so this calls for a completely new way of thinking about security. Because if I have the ability first with an invasive technique to change what you're thinking about, and later non-invasive technique, it means that I can manipulate your thoughts. Right now, if I tell you about that, it looks like sci-fi. But it's just a matter of time before that will happen. And when that happens, that will completely undermine a simple principle of every legal system, which is the responsibility of individuals. If I commit a crime, I will go into prison because I decided to commit the crime. Now, if there are devices that are interacting with my brain, who will be responsible? And so the entire domestic legal system will be turned upside down. These are the kind of issues that we are faced with.
Right. Thank you so much. We're a little bit running out of time, so let me quickly do a 2-minute wrap-up. It was two, fascinating, brilliant presentations. Sometimes when you sit in modernization panels, either you get too many questions, either you don't get many at all. Why? Because sometimes people are listening think, am I asking the right question from the experts? But anyway, I have 3 takeaways for you, right? 2 are very general, third one is very Sri Lankan. Being the only Sri Lankan in the panel, I should talk a little, do a little bit on the Sri Lanka as well. So the first point is speed. So all the 3 presentations, from autonomous weapons, electromagnetic spectrum, to militarization of space, pointed out the technologies are moving at exponential speed. Regulations, military thinking, doctrine, governmental regulations, none are keeping up. So that's creating a massive problem, 1 in governance and 2 in response. And in a time of geopolitical contestation, that's a bad mix. Number 2, the point I want to bring out is complexity, because all the 3 speakers brought out the fact that these technologies are not modernizing in abstraction. Technologies are modernizing within a concoction of civilian and military use. So how do you dissect that? How do you understand threats? How do you create situational awareness, which is one of the biggest challenges for any military in the 21st century? That's the second takeaway, the complexity. The technologies are lifting the fog of war, but it's creating another fog while lifting it. It's a techno-electronic magnetic spectrum-wise fog. The third point is very Sri Lankan. So we are doing the Colombo Defense Seminar, and the commander is here. So it's a point that the Sri Lankan military should take away. One example is we didn't get any question from Sri Lankans. It's not that I'm blaming Sri Lankans. The point that we are, in a way, we are awed. It's a shock and awe for us. We are seeing the technologies evolving. We are sitting right in middle of a geopolitical competition. our outer space, our terrestrial spaces, our sea surface, and our underseas. There are spaces that are all penetrated. We have been challenged by multiple challengers, adversaries, can be state, non-state, or sub-state. How does an army especially respond? So this will take us back to the drawing boards. So I think this is an important thing for in the Colombo Defense Seminar. We should commend the Sri Lankan Army for bringing these things out in the context, because this is not just a global problem, this is a local challenge as well. So how do we look forward to that? How do we mitigate that? How, as a small power, as a small state, respond to that as a military? So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much again for the speakers for bringing out a very dynamic, very interesting, very innovative, aspects of challenges of military modernization. So back to the organization. Thank you.